every organization is in the process of failing. By definition, that's capitalism. Once you've determined the organization can have profitable demand, all your problems are internal. If you can get
We all want to improve our lives, but sometimes it's hard to know where to start. Join us each week on the Stacking Habits podcast with your hosts, David, Matthew, and Caleb, as we uncover life-changing habits from inspiring people. Want to know the best part? You can then apply those habits to enrich your own life and move closer to your goals.
All right, well, welcome back to the Stacking Habits podcast, episode number 2. This is an exciting episode for me because we have Kevin Miller with us here today, and he's really important to me for 2 specific reasons. One is he was my professor in college for my very first business class and my very last business class, 2 of the most foundational classes, the 2 favorite classes I had while I was at school, and really the foundational class I kind of built on after I graduated. But even more so than that, he's also responsible for how I met Caleb Roth, which led to the business we started, grew for the last 5 years and sold. And really why we guys are all sitting here today is because of a networking event you put on. I happen to sit next to Caleb. We happen to be talking partly because you always talked about being a knowledge worker and how you always have to be seeking knowledge from other people. And I knew he just started a business, and I was like, hey, I should talk to him and figure out how he's done that, make a relationship, and that's what started pretty much all of this today. So that's really cool because it's a foundation to my story, and so I'm really thankful that you're here with us today to talk about that. The one thing I want to kind of kick this off with is when I was showing them a little bit about your bio and kind of stuff you've done in the past. And you're kind of known as the turnaround guy. You go into organizations a lot in the past, I think, where they were either failing and they needed to come around from it, or they were going through a transition that was chaotic and they needed to transition through it. That's a stressful situation most people tend to avoid at all costs. So how did you get sucked into helping chaotic organizations transition? It's literally the opposite of what people are looking for in a career path. How did you kind of get sucked into that career path?
I've never really been asked that directly before, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It actually happened because I started work at Ernst, the international accounting CPA and consulting firm, and I worked with another guy on these major company audits, and he left and started working for an insurance company, and he called me. He'd been there a couple of years, and he called me and said, "Are you interested in coming and fixing a crop insurance company?" And I said, "Ron, I have no idea. I know nothing about crop insurance." And he says, "Turns out nobody else does either."
Yeah.
He says, "I trust you to come in and look and tell me, can you fix it? If you can't, I'm happy with whatever your answer is, but I need somebody who can come in and analyze it." So I said, okay. So, I mean, that's a sweet deal. Where even if you're failing, you're going, here are the reasons I'm failing. So I wasn't looking to be one, but it was my introductory experience, and it was absolutely a blast. Crop insurance is a government-based thing. Their contracts are really complex. The company had really messed up how they understood and interpreted contracts, where not every sale is a good sale. It's like underwriting all drunk drivers. That's probably not very good if you're a car company. And so it was a highly analytical, data-based type of an approach. And they had a bunch of human resource problems, and they just didn't understand their own business about all of it. So I just happened because of that. And alongside that, I did a real estate, another person I knew from the Ernst experience, because he knew me because of his wife working there. And he called me and said, "Hey, I have this huge real estate problem in terms my company's been purchased to help solve that, and I'd like to have you come alongside and help me do that." So yeah. Every time that it happened, I kind of got invited in. I never have looked for it because
it finds you.
And part of it is, here's the real deal. You don't go into turnarounds without that company's key people that are the decision makers being emotionally qualified. And the vast majority of people are not emotionally qualified to have their organization fixed. They talk like they are. It's like someone who's on drugs. "Oh, yes, I want to be off drugs." Okay, we'll see how that works, because most people don't really want off drugs, or they don't have enough fortitude. So you're really interviewing them about whether they're qualified for a turnaround.
Sorry to interrupt, but
Go.
by emotionally qualified, are you talking about like self-awareness, or are you talking about them being able to admit fault?
Great question. It's usually positional awareness.
Okay.
Because if they get blamed for the problems, they don't want that. If they're going to lose their job, they don't want that. They kind of want me to come in and wave a wand and then just some little switch I need to turn. And it's usually more complex than that. And there's usually there's a saying for I use for turnaround. Once you've determined the organization can have profitable demand, all your problems are internal. If you can get profitable demand for what you're doing, all the problems are internal. And usually the person asking you didn't have the insight or the fortitude to make those fixes happen. And so I interview, and a lot of times I tell them, no, this isn't a really good fit for me. And the reality is I didn't think I could be successful because they really weren't ready to do a turnaround. So whenever I've done 4 or 5 of them different ways, and you pre-qualify for that. It's always a risk that there still be organ rejection. But of course, I had been a Christian. I became a believer when I was when I was 27. Blew my mind. I was doing that first turnaround, and I looked at the scripture, and I went, I'm doing a turnaround. Here's the greatest turnaround in world history. And so let me ask you a question. If you know anything about the Bible, was everybody happy to see Jesus? Were the Pharisees happy to see Jesus? Who was happy to see Jesus? Romans weren't? No.
Tax collectors.
The tax collectors. Nobody was happy to see Jesus. He came to do a turnaround, so he gathered people around him who were wanted to see a turnaround, the fishermen. And the people that were the deplorables. And he went, and they all gathered towards him. They liked the miracles. They're going, we'd like a turnaround in our life. And he went to the cross, and he created a turnaround for everybody, not just the deplorables, but the Pharisees and the tax collectors, if they will become emotionally qualified and ask Christ into their heart. So I realized, okay, this isn't the first rodeo that's ever been done.
So this show, we talk about habits, and there are habits in personal life, but also in business. In the turnarounds that you've been in on, like, have you noticed a common trend or a common theme in why a business is failing? Is it the people, the team? Is it the process, opportunity?
Most organizations just don't have astute leadership, and so they kind of take it from the previous group of executives. Most organizations don't even know what they're steward of. So what are you steward of? And if you don't have that nailed, then you can't ultimately thrive. Are you a steward for the stockholders? Are you a steward for the employees? Are you a steward for the customers? And as Matt knows, the answer is all three if you're a public company. If you're not a good steward for the customers, you're going to go out of business. If you're not a good steward for the employees, you're not going to keep great employees. If you're not a good steward for the stockholders, you go out of business because the capital's not worth anything. So that's a balancing act, and it's often out of whack. In fact, it's always out of whack. Your competitors put it out of whack. So if you're sitting there as a retailer and you think, this is so cool, I am a major, major retailer. I'm in these malls all the way across America. Nobody's building any more of these major malls. I have no competition. I'm really, really settled. I can be really great stewards here. And along comes Amazon going, well, you know what? I just don't need to be in your mall. I don't need a location to compete with you. So suddenly your stewardship equation changes. You have to be a knowledge worker, executive, to say, okay, that's a change. I can't be in love with the old model. I have to say, how do I shift? So it's in essence, corporations, you're completely correct. Every organization, good, bad, or indifferent, you are looking to see what is the culture, and are they even willing or want the culture changed? And who's in power if you do try to change it? And there are many places that I would not take a slot with them because I didn't perceive I could be successful, because what I perceived to be the stewardship did not match up with theirs, or they didn't realize the price they would have to pay to move from point A to point B. It may mean that they were fired or whatever the case may be because they weren't qualified for the work.
Yeah.
So along those lines, I used to work for Johnson & Johnson. They had a credo.
Yeah.
And so I worked for the orthopedic division.
Yes,
and they
yes.
said, we're responsible to patients, the ones who get our product, obviously. We're responsible to the doctors. We're responsible to the employees. And we're responsible to shareholders.
Right on.
And unfortunately, and I can't speak, I wasn't really high up or anything, but ultimately stockholders, that got inverted. And they favored the stockholders.
Yeah.
Hey, we didn't return enough profit. We're going to make changes. And it really wasn't, like, the idea was patients would come first. And that's theoretically, that one makes the most sense. But what happens is just because you say that's your intention doesn't necessarily mean that that's how you act.
Great, Zach. Hey, the problem is always matching up intentions with actually going with the elbow grease to get it done, and the commitment and all the fights that happen. And that change with the J&J has to happen incrementally and have complete awareness. You can't let it get so far out of control, because then recovering it becomes a problem. So the CEO who understands that then starts preparing the shareholders and says, hey, the landscape is changing. If we're going to be patient-centric, here's what's got to happen, da-da-da-da-da. And that understanding, that ability to communicate, that ability to have the foresight to do that well is unusual. And a lot of times a founder may have it because they have their fingers on it a lot better because they had to develop it from zero. You guys know that because you were a founder. Developing it from zero, and then you even got surprised a lot of times. You're going, whoa, we thought we were speaking for the customer. We didn't speak very well.
Oh,
right?
we learned over and over and over to listen. We put a lot of data. It was Scout IQ. The idea was it's very knowledge.
Yes.
And we put so much data. We invented eScore. We had all these like proprietary data metrics to make a better decision. Should I buy this book or not? And when we rolled it out, we started asking for feedback. And I was thinking everybody would think like me, which of course is not the case, and that's a good thing for the world. But we kept asking, what do you love about the app? And our customers over and over said, I buy the green books and I'm making money.
I like when it turns green at the top and tells me to buy it.
Yeah.
It's like, they didn't care at all.
And I'm like, yeah, but do you understand why?
And they don't care about
They
why.
didn't care. And at first I was like, that threw me for a loop. And then I realized, okay, I need to be designing for them. It's not about what I want.
Right.
Because that's just me. But if we're going to serve an audience, we have to figure out
Absolutely.
what
The greatest businesses in the world and nonprofits that ultimately the person thinks it's simple, you get offended by because you say, what? Do you realize what it took for me to get you that green light? And
they don't care.
No, but I'm really happy with you,
Yeah.
right? And what about a car? You go in and how many people know how a carburetor works in a gas engine car? They don't. But boy, they're angry when it doesn't, and they're perfectly happy until then, when everything happens to work right. And it's a fairly complex build, and everyone's pretty much, did it get me from A to B today? And was it too slick on the roads? It's really simple. So ultimately, the greatest business people, the greatest people who provide value to their customers and frankly to their shareholders. Shareholders don't care either. Stockholders don't care either. They care what'd you get, what was your return. Yeah. Don't bother me with the detail. I was comparing purchasing your stock versus buying Google stock. So I don't care about all the hard work you had. That's why I bought your stock. So ultimately, you have to get over yourself that they have to appreciate it, and just bask with the people that do understand it, and then take your stewardship somewhere else if you sell out. If you sell out or do whatever you do. Every organization is in the process of failing, by definition. That's capitalism. Because
Explain that.
Yeah, that's really curious.
That's a deep statement. Every organization is in the process of failing.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, how many competitors does Johnson & Johnson have?
A lot.
How many does a retailer have? How many does a college have? How many? We have massive numbers of competitors. That's why capitalism is so hard, and that's why it's so effective at providing value. Is you don't get to be the one-handed economist, and you hold everything constant. Oh, I'm only going to compete with Macy's, so I'll devise my whole thing. No, you have to compete with Macy's and JCPenney and TJ Maxx and Amazon all at once, and they all have different business models, and you have vulnerabilities to all of them in several ways. What are you going to do about that? That's hard. That's super hard. And ultimately, it's very unsustainable in the long haul, and a fast, especially. See, if you have, it worked 150 years ago, that you failed slowly. Now you can fail quickly,
And
especially
in
in the tech world you guys occupy. So, example, Blockbuster. Netflix comes to them and says, hey, we're failing, because they were. They were during the mail. They were mailing in at that stage, remember? Mm-hmm. They were and they go, we're struggling. And this is the early 2000s. And they offered themselves for $50 million to Blockbuster. And Blockbuster said, I'm pantomiming what they said, but the attitude, of course, was, who are you? We have 9,000 locations. We've nailed this. People show up. I mean, who's our competitor? Are you kidding me? Who are you kidding? They can come and do it overnight. You're doing it through the mail. None of that makes any sense. Because they didn't understand the landscape, and ultimately Netflix became Netflix well beyond sending out the mailed cassettes into the streaming. They didn't have anybody with the vision to say, wait a minute, this is tech. We are in a tech area. We ourselves are doing tech. Those VHS tapes were new technology 15 years before. And you said our opportunity is because we understood technology ahead of everybody else, and therefore people could do it at home, and aren't we smart? And you say, yes, but you didn't take it to the next step. So in our tech world, you have vulnerabilities because the technology destroys a lot of the value that traditional businesses have, which is physical locations, right? All that type of thing. So now I can get something from Amazon faster than I can drive to Walmart and back. I'm getting it. I ordered something from my wife on a Sunday at 11:45. Was there by 2:00 on the same day,
Yeah.
and I couldn't drive and get it even, right? So you're going, wow, that's a radical change. So technology causes it to be faster, but the shortest answer to what you're asking is, when you don't get to compete with one competitor. It's who gets to do that. You have multiple. In fact, the U.S. can't. We have multiple theaters we have to worry about. We have China. We have Russia. We have multiple theaters going on. So they're all trying to put you out of business. They don't. That isn't their ostentatious thing. Well, some do, but most of them are saying, no, I want to succeed, and I'm much better than everybody else. And when you have that many competitors, all of them tearing apart your business model a little bit over here, a little bit over there, a little bit over here, and then everyone fades from you. They go, we just don't go to that restaurant as much anymore. We don't go to Target as much anymore. We don't, and it just fades because handling multiple competitors at once is super, super difficult. And it's what causes tremendous prosperity. Secret to capitalism is failure. Failure. The fiction of communism is nobody fails. Everybody gets a third grade soccer trophy. Everybody's good. Everything's wonderful. Capitalism says, Miller, you're not going to play for the LA Lakers. Sorry. No matter, you don't get the participation trophy and get paid the same thing as LeBron, do you?
Bummer.
No. So you're constantly saying, hey, every time someone's competing with you for a space, they're trying to occupy that space and elbow you out. They don't have to have bad intentions. They just have good intentions to be a better steward of your customer than you are.
They're ultimately trying to serve the customer better.
And that's what creates huge prosperity.
Yep.
It also creates disruption for individual companies and individuals. Hence the turnaround issue, is that you don't get to hold everything constant and you're going to be thriving for the next 20 years. That's why you have to be a personal knowledge worker. Same thing. You can't do it without saying, I have to continually grab new skills and trash my old skills.
Back to the Blockbuster analogy you were talking about, one of the things that I really found profound going through, I forget which one of or there's the earlier class or later class in college, but is you kept talking about you have to know what business you're in, and if you get that confused, it's going to make everything else fail. And it's like, I remember talking about one of the locomotive companies, the train companies, they think they're in the train business. They take products from point A to point B, they're in trains, but really they're just in the transportation business. If they get stuck on, no, we're a train company, then once transportation starts moving to aircrafts and different things, like, nope, we're a train company. It's like, no, you're not. You're a transportation business. Just like Blockbuster thought, hey, we sell physical videos, when they really are in the entertainment business. They're entertaining people. And if they had that mindset of, hey, we're actually in the entertainment business, not in the physical video rental business, they could have seen that shift coming from a lot farther away, but they got their business model, I think, incorrect.
And it's so easy to do that because you have to, the human brain, you got to get something settled to hang on to. But if you settle on the wrong thing, if you make that brittle, the conversation we had earlier, then you didn't understand what you were really doing. One of the stories I love is Amazon. They couldn't get anybody to handle their data right. And so they kept asking, who can handle our data? So what did they create? AWS. And then what did Bezos do? He kept saying publicly, I don't know why we don't have a competition here, but they built AWS for a long time before the Microsoft and Google types came in. But they waited because why? They didn't perceive they were in that business.
But what's interesting about that is that sustained them. That's the only part of their business
That's
up
great,
until
yeah.
a few years ago that made money.
And it's the only way they could make the bits part of their business, the delivery of detergent and books, was to subsidize it with a pure digital play.
Which is all margin.
With all margin compared to very low margin. So that he got forced, he himself didn't quite catch, Bezos himself got forced into looking at the second division of the company, and it was his lifesaver. That's a huge, he's one of the brightest guys ever, and he kind of got forced into it because no one else thought there should be that business. And they didn't say, hey, we'll do that and you can be our primary customer. Where would they even be alive today?
Oh, they would not have competed with Walmart.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
even COVID accelerated the percentage of e-commerce that's done. It's still around 15%. It was only 10% pre-COVID, and it accelerated quickly.
Yeah.
But it's still, most retail is done in Walmart, Target. You name those
Oh
stores.
yeah, oh yeah.
So-
The lay perception is, well, Amazon must have 50% of the retail market. It's not even remotely, as you're saying, but because it's in the forefront of their brain and it's still relatively new and still eye-poppingly impressive.
Very much.
That you click and it shows up,
Same day or next day.
Yeah, whatever it is, and so all this is what makes business so hard, or nonprofits. I don't distinguish between business and nonprofit, in terms of the same problems with the mission and making it work. Is everybody's ready for it to fail. Because they're simply eating away. And what does a Bezos say? Your margin is my
Opportunity. Yep.
He's going, look, I don't have anything against you, but when you make that much money doing stuff, I can do it for a lot cheaper. Yeah. So that's, again, secret to capitalism is failure, because then we all say, I want to be steward of my pocketbook. I think I'll go with Amazon. And guess what? Amazon, as hard as it is to believe, Amazon will have problems the next 20, 30 years as it gets this constant slicing and dicing of all this stuff. It's and he says so. He's very blunt. He says, have you ever heard him say that? Bezos said, oh no, our company will be out of business. We got to plan on it being out of business in a short period of time. He's trying to instill that wake up within his own.
Yeah, you can't just rest on your laurels.
You cannot rest on these laurels. You got to say, what are our vulnerabilities, just like AWS was, and don't forget, we have to be vigilant on all this.
Well, it goes back, our last guest, Mike, we talked about the importance of playing offense versus defense. And if you just sit back and wait for your competitors to move, now you're playing defense. And sometimes you get caught with your pants down, for lack of a better analogy, and it can be game over.
The most striking, I have a deal about that. In fact, I have a podcast on it. You can find it. Whitestone's my podcast. Apple and Spotify. It is, I always ask at a crucial point of every organization, is this challenge offense or defense? And the answer is always both at the same time. Because if you don't go on offense, you're going to lose the company. And so every turning point for every company is, you don't go around thinking, well, this is offense and this is defense. You're probably in trouble. If it's not a good offensive move that's not helping protect everything else, or at least phase them out and understand. So I think ultimately you say, it's really both and almost all of it. Like AWS being added by Bezos. Was that offense or defense? Well, it was kind of defense so that he could have his data handled properly.
And he was essentially just building something he needed.
Right. He wasn't thinking, this is a grand new offense.
Like
offense.
you said, he stumbled into it.
And he says so. We didn't even think, we were stunned. He himself made it into offense because there was a vacuum in the market. It's phenomenal how all of it works. And that's why you teach from someone like Bezos and say, you have to change your mindset. And you have to be a knowledge worker that constantly says, what are my lessons from Amazon? What are my lessons from Walmart? Why is Walmart better positioned than anybody else right now against Amazon, really, with an installed base? Can they make it work? Can they really make a full transition? All of it is utterly fascinating. And all of us in business or nonprofits, you should take those lessons and say, how does that apply to what I'm doing today? Because all of it applies.
I've got a question. So you brought up this concept of a knowledge worker quite a few times now. And I'm just curious, in the context of this podcast, what are some habits of a successful knowledge worker?
Yeah, the great question. Let's go with what a knowledge worker is. That's someone who's at the top of the game in their area, in their space. And so, in essence, it's a knowledge. The point of a knowledge worker in our era, it has changed radically. It helps to even make that understanding. I mean, for thousands of years, your grandparents grew rice, your parents grew rice, you grew rice. And so only with the Industrial Revolution and that things started changing, and then there were a few dominant players. Now it's radically changed down to every individual skill set, because suddenly my job can be replaced by AI. My job is changing because of the tool. There's not a doctor, a surgeon who's above 50 years old who hasn't had their world upside down about microsurgery type techniques, et cetera, and everything that's evolving. So what they learned at the end of medical school was absolutely state of the art, no matter what the school, but what they're doing 30 years later is radically different. The person at the top of their game 30 years later, that surgeon, is the one who was a knowledge worker that said, oh, I graduated from highfalutin school on the East Coast, and I'm the best at age 30. I am the ultra surgeon that got to stand in place. They would have been just wiped away by anybody else who then morphed their knowledge. And you say, well, that's okay for surgeons. No, it's true of everybody. How about car mechanics? 30 years ago, car mechanic had the greasy rag and a physical wrench, like like you'd get from Sears. And that was the whole idea of it.
What's
Now
Sears?
what is it?
What's serious?
There you go. Now
It's
it's
computers.
the computer guy. The guy that understanding the diagnostics and understanding astutely what the reading really is. Well, that's just a radical change at what we'd consider an easy job, a low level. And so everybody has to be a knowledge worker now. And that mindset, that habit, see, it's an open-ended habit. You don't get to say, see, habits used to be, I get in a groove, and I'm going to do that over and over again, and I'm going to be super good at it. The problem is all the grooves change. So the habit of a knowledge worker is that you're habitually growing as a knowledge worker. It's not that you got it in a groove and you do the same thing over and over for 40 years. It's that you say, I have a great foundation nobody else has because I'm at the top of my game when I'm age 30. And then the knowledge worker is, I will morph and be ahead of all the competitors for the next 30 years because the technological change alone in virtually every job will dramatically alter it. So the knowledge worker mindset is, I have the habit of morphing my skills all of the time. And that's very counter to most people's emotions. We want to stop the world. I should be rewarded. I've worked hard.
I've arrived.
I've arrived. I'm 40 years old. I have 2.3 children. All I really want to do is buy that vacation home in Aspen, Colorado, and go skiing every year and make, good money, well into six figures, and coast for, I deserve this. Coast for the next 20, 30 years. That job doesn't exist. Or you can go to Bangladesh and do the same thing over and over and grow rice and have subsistence living. Yeah, if you want that, you can go do it. But if you want to be in a society like ours that's vibrantly service-oriented and really bettering people's lives. See, the whole idea of capitalism, I love this term, is betterment. Betterment of others. Who you serving? From a Christian viewpoint, I'm a steward of my customers. I want to better their lives. What am I doing? Did Amazon better your life? Yeah. Did Google better your life? Duh. Right? For someone my age, you guys are really young. But did Google completely change how you can get information? Yeah. Did they better it? Yeah. Huge deal. So if you're in a betterment society, which is what we should want to be in, you don't get to make it a static response that, everybody else has to change, but I don't. So the irony of habit is you have to be in the habit of growing. It isn't, see, the habit is, I'm going to get, everybody, when you say habit, everybody goes, I'm fixing that. I am going to do that over and over and over and over again. Well, yeah, you grow over and over and over. You grow and you discard, grow and you discard, grow and you discard.
So let's get practical with that. So I buy the argument. We talked about it in the pre-show. We built software and spent a full year putting it together, putting the features together, listening to our customers or who we thought our customers would be. We finally rolled that out, and part of me thought we were going to be done. We might add a feature or two a year later, but the reality is for the next 5 years, we never stopped developing. We had to. If we didn't, competitors would have eaten our lunch. Software's changing, the platforms are changing, the operating systems are changing. So I understand the only constant is change, and
Yes.
you can't just sit there and be brittle,
Right.
otherwise you will break. So if I understand that, how do I make sure I'm studying the right things in terms of evolving myself and staying ahead of the curve? What are some practical things that you've seen or that you would recommend for someone that's 22, just graduating college and ready to start their career?
It all depends on who you hang out with. And that means, are you hanging out with people that are static? Are you hanging out with people that get that and they're driving for the change? And the good news is doesn't have to be inside people you see in the flesh and blood that you work with, because now we have so much access to information. Are you studying Bezos? Are you studying what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong? You got to study, you got to benchmark to the best. Matt knows I talk a lot about benchmarking. I love this story, okay, came from Southwest. It's one of my favorite all-time stories. Southwest Airlines started, and they were a regional airline at that time. This is Texas only, across the major cities in Texas. And they realized they wanted to be a very low-cost supplier of airfare. And so they knew if they're going to buy these planes, they couldn't just do 5 flights a day. They need to get the productivity of their planes up. Herb Kelleher was a very colorful CEO of Southwest. And so he said, okay, if we're going to buy those airplanes for X dollars, we want them up in the air 10 times a day instead of 5 times a day, or whatever that ratio was. What do we do to do that? And of course he said, well, let's get them in and out of the gate faster. So he wanted to go benchmark. Benchmark is the whole idea. Who do we compare to? What is best practices? So did he go benchmark against American Airlines or United Airlines? Which one?
Whoever
Probably
was the best.
neither.
Neither. He went to Indy 500. He sent his executives to the Indy 500 and said,
That's
they turn
genius.
around a piece of equipment in 6 seconds. I want you to go study that. Forget about American United. They're not in the game of turning around planes like we want to. We're going to blow it away. So you benchmark outside your industry. A lot of our problems are you benchmark to your industry because you think they're your competitors. Well, the way you leapfrog your competitors, you benchmark outside your industry with a relevant benchmark. And they came back and they did it. And to this day, whether you're a fan of Southwest or not, they've had their share of problems, partly because of
Software.
Yeah,
We've had a lot of software issues.
Big deal. Big deal.
Yeah.
They relied on software too long instead of refreshing.
Yep.
It was brittle
Yeah.
software. Okay.
I fly them almost exclusively.
Yeah,
so.
and they're a great airline.
They're phenomenal.
They're my favorite still,
Yep.
but they still have real problems with that kind of stuff because organizations have problems with that. It's awfully hard to, when do you pull the trigger? But when he did that, in essence, they blew away the competition and they had extremely low-cost flights compared to everybody else. Extremely low-cost flights because he benchmarked outside outside his domain because he realized our domain sucks at this.
Well, and they standardized everything. So they only fly 737s. They've
Right.
got the 700 series, 800 series, and the MAX. That's it.
To this day, when you disembark from deplane, I think they call it, when you deplane from Southwest, where are the flight attendants? If you're on row 30, where are the flight attendants?
The front, right?
No, they're working their way back.
They're already picking up trash.
If you're already trying to
Oh,
turn the
yeah.
plane on a quick turn, so they're back, and when I'm up. I fly towards the back, hopefully the aisle, middle of the aisle, over the wing, and in essence,
You get the
they're in
Southwest
row
first
20
class.
when I'm in row 25, and they're picking up, making sure they are still in their culture. They're trying to turn that plane around faster. Well, that's a good thing in their culture, but they have other things. It can't be the only thing. But the other airlines, I've never seen that happen. And the other airlines complain about it. They complain about Southwest, this and that. But how come they don't benchmark even to Southwest or go? Look, here's the deal. The creativity and the curiosity, one of the things I really loved about Matt, he had tremendous and still has great curiosity, always poking around on stuff, wondering about this stuff. One of the best students I ever had about that particular thing, it's what an entrepreneur has to do, and that is, let me break the mold and benchmark wherever I need to, and that will cause things to open up. And if I can import it in legitimately, I can blow away my industry for the short term. And then, do you wait? No. You look for the next thing you can do. So you're always ahead of the industry.
I went to a small Christian college called Grace College in
Yeah, yeah.
Indiana, and they called that transferable skills.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs had a quote. It wasn't exactly about this, but he talks about connecting the dots. He goes, sometimes life doesn't make sense, but when you look back at it, you can connect the dots and go, oh, that's what I was learning way back here.
Yeah.
So I've kind of stolen that phrase from him, but it's transferable skills. It's when you read books, when you meet other people outside of your industry. That's why it's important to network. You take a great idea somewhere else and you literally just plagiarize it. You take it and go, that works there. I wonder if that could work in our business. And often that's where the greatest ideas come from, just because you were able to connect something from over there to.
And see, that's a vital part of what you ask about the knowledge worker. The knowledge worker is never bounded by all the rules that everybody thinks they're supposed to be bounded by. especially within their industry or within their company. And when a turnaround person comes in, or any executive comes in, their job is to say, I won't accept a job with anything less than this, because we're competing with way too many folks that are not bounded by your rules. Why do you have these rules that are fictional? And so the very first, I have freshmen that come in at age 18 in my business class, and I ask them the first week, are you ready to be a knowledge worker? And it means you got to, this mindset. I am pushing you into this mindset. It is a lifestyle mindset, and it is a habit, a flexible habit. It's not a grooved habit, except the groove is the growth. That I will, if I haven't grown in my knowledge the past year, then I don't have a good habit of a knowledge worker. I should have said, if you're a great knowledge worker, you should be able to tell me what things that I thought were core have I discarded the last 3 years, and what have I added? Because these things were negotiable. Now, not because you can think of it at the moment, but once you get in that thought, you go, oh yeah, I've done that.
I remember in Business 101, one of the things you had everyone do was, back then at least, I'm curious if you're doing the same thing, is to get a subscription to, I think it was the Wall Street Journal, and talking about becoming a knowledge worker. Every day you should be learning something new. You should be reading. You should be keeping up on current events. And we'd have to read that, and we'd have quizzes and stuff on that. Do you still subscribe to that same way of that kind of habit of learning every day, taking something that's giving you new knowledge every day and doing that? Do you have students still do that, or have you adjusted the means that they're taking in knowledge each day?
Far better than that. I read the Wall Street Journal every day to do that. I mean, it isn't because I think, okay, I know everything. This is evolving so fast. New technology, new strategies enabled by technology. Smart people doing new things and repositioning. They're doing that kaleidoscope like Herb Kelleher did for Southwest, and then they put it together differently, and you go, whoa, I can use the same principle. So yes, all my classes, including Biz 101, they get a quiz. They read 3 Wall Street Journal articles. They'll do it every time. They get tested on them so that they start realizing here's the real world. This isn't theory. And you can look at this, you need to absorb it and understand, put it in your toolkit. But as I said, Matt, it's for me. I mean, that's what I do. I'm reading every day going, how do I need to shift? Do I need to discard something? Is this affirming my worldview?
Yeah.
Is this an affirmation? Or, hey, I just learned something new here, and I'm holding it in abeyance for a minute. I don't know exactly what it means. This has happened to us all the time in technology. Let me look at that. That's pretty interesting. That's a little one-off. I hadn't thought about it. Then suddenly something else happens. We go, that looks pretty similar. And we start, let me do some little homework on it. We find the third and the fourth. We realize, holy cow, this is coming, this is true, and it can change my business. And if I don't do it, my competitors will be. So you're always testing against what you know, and we never know enough. But what you know, and how do I adjust? Am I saying it's a total affirmation, no problem, right? Or is it a totally new thing and it's so far off base because somebody is trying to act like they're an innovator and it's not there, or they're years ahead? You with me?
Yeah. So slight rabbit trail, but still somewhat on the same topic. One thing I've been super curious of, and I haven't got a chance to talk with you about this yet, is, of course, everyone's talking about AI, ChatGPT, all of that stuff. How has that impacted, if any, your ability to teach? And what's your thought on, I'm sure students are using this. I'm sure students are trying to use this. I know a ton of my assignments I would have had in college would have not been the same if we had the same access to the information today. I know you don't want to discourage students from using it. You want to have them use the current technology, but how do you balance that learning aspect, making sure they're actually learning while knowing that this is out there now? How have you adjusted how you give assignments and how you grade, and how has that impacted you?
This is a profound question, and I will make the first observation that the AI of today is not the AI of 2 years from now or 10 years from now. So it's like what we just talked about a moment ago, where it's the first phase. It's obviously profound, but it's nowhere near its maturation. So to drive your stake in the ground going, okay, this is clear, this is our path. No, it's like any technology. The manifestation 10 years from now could be so far dramatic. That, you with me here? Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is, I'll give you, it is very crude in many ways. When we did internal faculty training, the dean of theology got up and he said, okay, here's what I did. I went in and had ChatGPT. I asked them, what are the accomplishments of the Trump administration? And it came back with a message that said, we do not take positions on topics like this.
Yeah, they always give those little
Yeah.
certain questions.
So
to
then he
cop out
went-
answers.
What are the accomplishments of the Biden administration? And they listed 25 accomplishments. So ChatGPT is built by human beings, and it has its own biases. They were the same within seconds. The similar question was politically biased against one administration versus another. They were perfectly willing to name all the accomplishments of an administration they apparently found more favor with. Well, that's a very revealing thing. So I'll come to it in a minute. One other data point. I just read this and sent it to all my colleagues in the School of Business. The computer science prophet, I think it was Vanderbilt, all of his computer science majors are very threatened by it. They're going, did we just waste our time on a degree because we're going to be replaced?
Yeah.
And so he actually created a fake student. I can't remember the name, but it was something like George Peter Thompson, which stands for GPT. And he had a bunch of graders, and he gave assignments out, and he had chat do that. And then he had his independent graders grade.
Like
grade
not
it. They
knowing-
did
not
not
knowing,
know
yeah,
it was GBT is the answer because he wanted to
hilarious.
eliminate the grade bias. You with me here?
That's pretty good.
Brilliant. It's the way a good testing would be, right? So it came back, and in the first class that he had, sorry about that,
you're good.
first class that he had, it scored lower than every other student on the assignment. And the second one, it was in the bottom third, and he announced to his students, and they were thrilled. But I caution you, that was the first phase of AI.
yeah.
And so here's where I will tell you. I don't have much threat at CCU, where I'm teaching at this Christian university, because ChatGPT is not written by Christians who have any understanding of integrating the faith. So because I ask such integrated questions about the faith, there's no way ChatGPT is going to
It's
come
not going
back.
to give an automated response. to
Yeah,
the question you're
it just
asking.
it doesn't understand the level I'm teaching at, because most Christians don't talk about integration of the faith. They compartmentalize the faith. There's work, and here's my faith on Sunday. And I, as you know, I don't do any of that. So I'm not worried about it in the short run, but here's what I really told them. I announced this. I said, here's your problem. ChatGPT is still an averaging. It may be a high average, but they're pulling from huge amounts of sources, and they may be super fast. But the reality is the problems of tomorrow are like the Herb Kelleher story. ChatGPT isn't about to pull from the Indy 500 for an aircraft company. You with me here? Because that's an association that only Herb Kelleher at Southwest Airlines made by human curiosity empowered by the Holy Spirit in my world. And therefore, ChatGPT is programmed by people who are often analytical programmers who make certain associations. Therefore, you have, like any program, the bias of the programmer involved. And I tell them, you've got two problems. One is you have a bias that you need to be able to ride herd on. And the second thing is that this is going to backfire on you. If you start doing this and you get in the habit of this, what's going to happen is you're going to have, and you're really pleased because it's better work than you can do, and you ship that to your
You're talking
boss.
about people using ChatGPT?
ChatGPT, including in the workplace. And you do it, and you start shipping stuff to your boss. Then you get into a meeting with the client, and your boss turns to you and says, well, you wrote about all this. How'd that work? And because you
Crickets.
created a lie and you didn't really even understand, because you were so lazy you did it, you're basically cheating your own boss. And then suddenly, did you really go back and research it after the ChatGPT and get all the ins and outs and improve it some because of the weaknesses? Or did you get that, like people who do shortcuts, you just said, oh, it's going to work. And the reality is, you do that for 5 years, you're not a knowledge worker. You're a searcher on a search engine.
Yeah, you're
Indispensable.
outsourcing. You're
Yeah,
outsourcing the.
I'm telling you,
the
if you
knowledge
want to,
work.
if you want to be relegated to nobody when you're age 35, just spend 15 years doing ChatGPT, because that, for anybody that's worth working for, that will not carry the water in the long haul, no matter how sophisticated it gets, because the human brain brings associations, and I think, in my view, John 14:26, the power of the Holy Spirit brings association. As we've talked in the classes and how I teach, it brings associations that only God can bring and the human ingenuity can bring. And ChatGPT it'll become phenomenal and replace a lot of things like the car mechanic issue will be. It will replace a lot of things. But for the true knowledge worker who's trying to pull it all together, applies themselves to it, and then does human interaction, explaining what they're doing and where they're doing, and train other people. What do you do to train other people when ChatGPT gave you the answer? And they ask you a question, and you go, I'll get back to you on that. That's going to be the biggest response in corporate meetings 10 years from now, is the person will go, they ask them a question about something that came from ChatGPT or its equivalent, and they'll go, let me think about that. And pretty soon everyone will know what that means.
Yeah.
It means you don't really have a clue what you're talking about, and you deferred so that you to go do more research. And so in my class, as you recall, I can't remember if I was doing this at the level when you took my class at the senior level, but did I do the groups, the HBR groups?
Yes, you did. Yes.
So that's where someone.
Are you talking about the presenting in front of the class?
Yeah. With the group.
Yeah.
So we have a group, and I make them read
You
the
should
same.
explain that, because that was one of the most interesting things of the class I took, because there was no way for us to cheat around that or to figure out some loophole. It was something where you actually had to. Every class tells you read a chapter every week. Very few classes. Can I explain the concept?
Yeah, please.
So
Please.
the way he did his capstone class, we're all reading the same book like normal classes do. We have to read a certain chapter. But as you guys know, a lot of times you're not reading the chapter every single week. Sometimes you read 4 chapters. Very few people do the actual reading. What he would do is at the beginning of every class, he'd select at random. You could be chosen multiple times. You could be chosen a single time, but you would be chosen. You have to come in front of the class and teach everyone the chapter that you read that week. So every single week you had to be prepared to present to the class and teach whatever chapter was supposed to be written. So there was no way you could skip reading that week, because there's a very good chance you'd be called up to the front. And then you're, like you said, if you've been asking ChatGPT for the answers, it's not coming to you when you're sitting up at the front and have to teach the class.
And you're corresponding with other people, and they're bringing up points.
Yeah.
Which is what their normal human interaction is. They're saying, well, what about this? When you thought about that, what happened here? And then I would substitute your team members. You had to carry the thread forward from your team members. So for 4 teams, you'd have a total of 12 people in an hour, and you had to build on the creativity and the curiosity from people that had all prepped. Well, the ChatGPT will never work for you, because you went in not doing the work. People ask you, what's the substance of why you said that? And so I only want someone to say, like Matt would have said, well, that's Amazon, and that's what they did with AWS, with Amazon Web Services. And he did it off the cuff because he knew from his reservoir and that of information and data and how he'd already processed, when someone asks him a specific question, he calls it up in response to the specificity. So what's going to happen is it's a dumbing down at an elite level, but everybody shares the same data, and then the Herb Kelleher's always win, because they're the ones that really were creative, that really didn't depend on. I mean, this is how it really works. It's a constant, never-ending deal, and the person who's on top of that is used to all that discarding, and they're used to a lot of effort that is failed. You know, Thomas Edison is, you know, I do a podcast. You can go listen to this. It's really profound. You know, his whole point was every failure is a data point. This is awesome. Anybody who does software realizes, well, yeah, but not when you did your first year. You thought, no, we're going to get everything perfect, and then you realized
That
some of
doesn't
the
exist.
assumptions you had were failures in your understanding, that I needed to have unbridled stuff, and I should have been more encompassing. And so Edison basically kept saying, oh, no, failure. You're looking for failure. It's your friend. Failure is your friend. And so here's the beautiful thing about capitalism. Everyone else's failure is your friend. Go study the failures alongside the. Everyone says, well, I want to study success. Well, I want to study failures too. I want to find out who was arrogant like Blockbuster. And that's why we bring it up. You say, why did they fail? Am I falling into similar ways of thinking, of arrogance? Because the human psyche is always about arrogance. You know, I've worked really hard. I deserve this. I'm Blockbuster. We're winners. No, look, we got 9,000 stores. Who's going to even build 500 stores? And the answer, they were correct. Nobody ever built 500 stores after 2002. They didn't need to. Nobody ever built another store for a video store. And so they were asking the wrong question because of their arrogance and hubris of, well, we're the top of the world. Anybody who does anything technologically and they're midstream like they were with tapes, then they weren't aware that technology could really displace them? Really? When we were getting on the internet for years before that? I mean, then nobody's going to handle that much traffic to really show a video. And that's pretty foundational that sooner or later that would happen. Don't know when. So this gets to your habits. I love your topic for your podcast. It always gets back to habits. And the reality is humility is that you never know enough. And that no matter what you know, you go to work every day going, I don't know enough. I need to be thinking, researching, pounding on this constantly. And the sheer distribution of all the people working the same problem means somebody's probably solved it.
So we have one more question I want to ask you real fast. So for people that are not believers, for people that are going about business, they want to be successful in business, can they apply these same principles of the knowledge worker in the same way you're talking about? Or how would you say that's different? Or is that something that's easily overlapped? If someone's listening to this, they say, I don't know about the Christian stuff, the faith stuff. I just want to be better at business. I want to learn these habits. Is that the exact same application they can do to their life to become a knowledge worker?
Yeah, it is. I guess God created human beings in his image. So he's equipped everybody with curiosity, ability to process in varying degrees. I mean, Steve Jobs was not a believer. And frankly, so I'm not looking at saying you are automatically better if you're a Christian. You do have an additional equipping that I think is really, really helpful and important. And I would invite anybody who's not a Christian to say, maybe I ought to look into this. Yeah, I would encourage that. So go check it out. But inventors and people that are great at this have a gifting they've nurtured. That's what, in fact, Steve Jobs is a great example. Where he loved where he was with PCs for a long, long time, and Apple was plateaued because he wanted to be just the key guys for all the nerds, with 2% of the appliances. Yeah. Then after he got kicked out of Apple, if you recall the history, he got fired, and he did Pixar and did genius stuff, and then he came back and he goes, "This isn't good enough. I want to be the innovator." And become much more democratic, where everybody uses it. So he did his the ear gear, and then he realized, wait a minute, let's pull all these other ideas out and stop doing the flip phone. I saw the interview, you probably did too. They said, why are you doing phones? Everybody's done phones. He says, well, it's not the phone you're thinking about that I'm going to do.
Yeah.
So he is not a believer, but he developed the skills of being super curious and how things fit together that are new, benchmarking well outside. So all the same principles can be applied. I want to encourage everybody, you can be great at business. People have been great at business that aren't believers, but it has a terminus of how valuable it is, because when you die, you have a destiny you need to be thinking about.
Yeah. No, I like that. I like the knowledge worker habit of always learning. Kind of, Caleb, you said this in the very first intro we did, where you said you're the same person each day except for the things you've read and the people you've talked to. And it's like you said, if you look back at your life the past few months and you think to yourself, I haven't learned anything, I haven't implemented anything new, then you obviously need to change the day-to-day habits of what you're doing to incorporate new knowledge, to incorporate, just like you said, taking random things. It doesn't make sense at first, but you have it in the back of your mind. It's sitting there, and then suddenly it overlaps with something you've learned in the past, and it suddenly makes sense. And so I like that idea of the habit of becoming a knowledge worker and figuring out ways to implement that into your life each day to make sure you're constantly learning, because your business, like you said, is being taken apart. Whether you like to see it or not, it's being taken apart. You have to fight for that every single day to keep that growing. So I really like that. What is your podcast name, and then where are people able to find that right now?
You can find it. It's a Whitestone Podcast, one word.
Okay.
Whitestone Podcast. You can find it on Apple and Spotify, or on my website, which is whitestone.org, one word, whitestone.org. And I have a couple of seminars on there that are about, number one, Lasting Greatness Seminar, which I do, which is a Christian application of all this. And then
Lasting Greatness thing was the seminar we probably...
Well, yeah, you may have seen part of that maybe when you came, Caleb. But then I also did the series about platforms. Maybe you saw that. And
I know you definitely talked about that.
Yeah, the platform part could be of interest to anybody, whether you're a Christian or not, because I compare, this has been 5-6 years ago, but it holds up really well because the principles were there. But it compares Facebook, Google, Amazon, and the kingdom of God. And because they're all platforms that give away massive value for free. That's what Facebook does. It's free. Google is free. Amazon is better than free because they actually lower the price of goods to you. It's actually better than free, even though you say, well, it wasn't free. I spent money on it. But at the price of goods and delivery and effort, it's better than free. And then I compare it, and it may be of interest even if you're an unbeliever, why the kingdom, they've really taken the whole idea of the free grace of God for eternity by manifesting at the cross. And those three companies, who were all unbelieving companies, don't even realize they have stolen the idea, or they have stumbled, I should not stolen, have stumbled into the idea by the human ingenuity of following the model that's been 2,000 years old about free. When we can deliver the gospel to someone from Bangladesh, and it's just as valuable to them as it is to someone in America.
If
Another
someone
topic
wanted to
for
get in
another day.
contact with you, how could someone get in contact with you if they wanted to learn more? Is your website the best way to go to?
Yeah. You can go to thewhitestone.org, or my email is kmiller. That's my first initials, K, as in Kevin, kmiller@whitestone.org.
Perfect. All right.
I'll just leave it with one last analogy. Kevin, thanks so much for coming in and spending this time with us. It was the delight to have you. When I worked for the orthopedic company, our tagline was never stop moving, because if you stop moving, it's terrible for your muscles, your joints, etc. So the key to keep them going is to actually just keep moving. And it's a little counterintuitive. You go, my knee hurts, I need to rest. But the point is, just keep going. And the analogy I want to leave people with is, imagine a treadmill just moving 1 or 2 miles an hour. Not very fast, but we always have this mentality in business or in life that we can just stay still and rest for a minute. When you're doing that, you're actually going backwards.
Yep.
So you're either moving forwards, you're either being curious, you're pursuing the edges of knowledge, or you're moving backwards. So my friends, stay curious, and until next week, we'll catch you on the Stacking Habits pod. Thanks.